Welcome to the PowettPlay podcast, where international cricketer Kieran, Powell and marketing genius Shannon join forces, bringing you captivating conversations with the biggest players in cricket and business. Join us as we dive into the lives of current stars in the cricketing world, the legends before them, and those extraordinary icons whose performances changed the game in both cricket and business. Exploring journeys both on and off the pitch, the boardroom, and everything in between. Get ready for an exhilarating blend of cricket, life, and business insights, with two insatiably passionate, infuriatingly no-holds-barred hosts, who, unfortunately for the rest of us, live and breathe this stuff for a living.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 48 of the PowettPlay podcast. I'm your host Shannon, and as always I'm joined by my co-host Kieran, Powell, and today we're joined by former West Indies captain and current coach Jimmy Adams. Thank you so much for joining us, Jimmy. How are you?
Pleasure. I'm doing well, mate, thankfully. The body's holding up and the weather here in Jamaica isn't too bad, so all in all, no complaints.
Oh, brilliant. Great to hear. So I just want to start out really, so how did your life in cricket start in Jamaica?
So it wasn't any different from most other lads who came through the system. I started playing in primary school. Well, I started playing in my community. We had a lot of families live close together with kids my age, and we knocked about with cricket and football. And then the primary school that I went to was a primary school in a part of Jamaica that played a lot of primary school cricket.
Right.
So there was a lot of cricket in primary school. We played competitively within my parish. And then from primary school, I went to high school. And the high schools in Kingston at the time had 2, sometimes 3 age group teams that played amongst each other.
Yeah.
And I played schools cricket. And then from schools cricket, you get selected into a national age group squad.
Yeah.
From there, you represent the country at regional tournaments, age group tournaments. In my time, we only had 19s. Now they have 19s, 17s, and 15s, but we only had 19s in my time. And then, from there, the sort of pathway system takes over. If you do well in youth cricket, it was an automatic ticket to national senior men's trials.
Right, okay.
Which would qualify you to play for Jamaica, and then from there, performances regionally would take you to the top. So most of the lads in Jamaica and probably in most Caribbean islands went the same route, sort of schools cricket, youth cricket, where you really first come into sort of regional recognition, and from there, the good youth cricketers get drafted into the various senior squads.
Yeah.
And then, your performances from there sort of take you the rest of the way.
So at what age did you start to get the trials and into representing the Jamaica?
Senior team?
Straight in the senior team then, yeah.
So I went first as a 16-year-old.
Right, okay.
So I was pretty young at the time, still in school. But yeah, it started in my teenage years, and the rest, as I say, is kind of like history.
And was you always predominantly a batter, or was you predominantly somebody you left arm spin at the start as well?
I used to do a bit of everything. Predominantly batting, but I'd keep wicket sometimes. I'd do a bit of bowling. Okay. Yeah, so just anything that would keep me involved in the game.
Yeah. And at the early start of your career, who was sort of your real influences back then?
Well, I had one coach for pretty much my entire career, and an ex-West Indian test player called Rohan Kanai, and he would have been probably the biggest cricket influence on my career. But then I played club cricket as a kid in a club that had Jeffrey Dujan, who at the time was still playing international cricket and kind of one of the best at what he did.
Yeah.
And he took an interest, so he sort of, he was always there. He lived in Jamaica, so he would always be at club practice sessions.
Right.
Eventually, I would end up playing in the same club team as him as a schoolboy. So you'd not only listen, watch, but you could also play with. So he had a really big influence on my career from a very early age. I was about 13. Yeah.
So then where did this sort of trajectory of your career sort of start then? As you mentioned there, obviously at 16, playing in the national side. When did you start to see the performances sort of go where you thought, you know what, this is going to be a career for me and I've got a real opportunity of developing, into something as such?
Well, I think pretty much from a mid-teens, I kind of started to see international cricket as a real possibility,
right?
And started putting a lot of time and effort and resources into following that dream.
Yeah.
I used to play quite a bit of football. Loved it. Wasn't bad at it, but cricket sort of took over when I was about 16.
Right.
And it became the only sport from 16 onwards.
Yeah.
And yeah, probably from that age, you kind of sort of had that dream about going all the way and representing the region internationally.
And then from breaking into the Jamaican side, who was it who was currently playing at that time who sort of took you under the wing that sort of helped you develop, not like I say personality-wise, but also give you that sort of like learning style in terms of how to approach certain parts of the game, but also your development as well as a cricketer?
Well, I think there are a lot of good positive influences. Dujan was still playing first-class cricket as well. So I would play a first-class and club cricket with him. I had Michael Holding for a few years.
Right.
I had Courtney Walsh. I had Patrick Patterson, all of whom were international players at the time.
Yeah. And
then there were quite a few senior Jamaican players who were not test players, but still played a huge role in my development in those years. Basil Williams, who was a former test player and who was my first national captain.
Right.
Very influential. He stayed in the cricket system even after he retired from first class cricket. So he and I worked together because he became a selector. He was a team manager. So and somebody who, like Dujan, very much built his whole ethos around standards, which was a big help then, because I think like a lot of young people of my generation, sometimes if you achieve something, you can sometimes lose track very easily, and these gentlemen sort of made it their job to make sure that no matter what happened in the middle, that I stayed grounded and kept working.
Yeah. So from making your first class debut, was it 84, 85 when you made your first class debut then? From that period to then making your test debut in 92, did you have how did you process that sort of time, and did you ever sort of come to a point where you thought that the opportunity might not necessarily come, or what sort of obstacles were sort of in your way at that moment, other than, well, I suppose it was being a part of a great West Indies team at that moment, I suppose?
Well, this is in hindsight, Jordan. It worked itself out in the end, because nothing that I would have done prior to 1992 would have got me into a West Indies 11.
Yeah.
And the proof of that is if you look at Brian Lara's record in that period, he broke records in regional cricket.
Yeah.
I still couldn't get into an 11. So 1992 became sort of like the pivotal year in the transition of that great generation and the generation to follow. So it kind of worked itself out. And the 7 or 8 years of first class cricket, again, this is hindsight. You don't know at the time when you're going through some of the issues. It was a good grounding because I sort of experienced quite a bit. The highs, the lows, and everything in between. Came back from them. So by the time you get to international cricket, you sort of have a pretty healthy perspective on not just the game, but life in general, which helped.
Yeah.
So I don't look back on that period as anything but good preparation.
Yeah.
Mentally, physically, emotionally. And it served me well going forward.
Yeah. So do you feel that potentially, obviously, then breaking in 92, it was always going to be a tough ask, naturally anyway, because you're following on from such a legendary generation, as you mentioned then? Odd.
It wasn't something that I thought about.
No.
I was totally. I mean, at that stage, most young people, and I was no different. I was totally in the moment. It's something that I dreamt about for years and years.
Yeah.
And I was just desperate for an opportunity. It took me a couple of years to become a regular in the team. Yeah. When I did play, I was only playing because people were injured or stuff like that, and so I had enough on my plate. Just trying to get into the team on a consistent basis to be worrying about, whatever legacy Viv and them might have left, which is a rich one, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't first and foremost in my mind at the time.
Yeah. And in terms of going back to that Test debut, how did it feel sort of getting the call that you were going to, and how did the call come about that you were going to make your debut against South Africa?
We were playing an A tour, a home series against England, and in the last game at Kensington Oval, the room attendant said, "There's a call for you." There's a phone just outside this room on the wall at the time. So it was a chairman selector saying, "Congrats, you've been selected into the squad to face South Africa on that home series." So I mean, it didn't come with bells and whistles that you get these days. Sometimes it's just but I mean, don't get me wrong. It still meant the world to me. And it was. Sort of floating on a cloud for a little while after that,
No. And in terms of obviously then breaking into the side, you mentioned there about sort of taking a bit of time sort of in and out. How did you sort of take the being in and out of the side, and how did it sort of affect you sort of, mentality wise at that point?
Listen, there are times, I'd be lying if I said there are times when, it was hard to stomach. You'd put in a performance and then the senior player comes back in.
Yeah.
It was the way the game and West Indies team functioned at the time. So you sort of try to console yourself by saying, listen, let me by hook or crook get there, and then hopefully they afford me the same courtesy.
Yeah.
Going forward. But there were times when it was tough. You obviously you as a young player, you sort of really wrapped up in your own world, and you've put in a performance, albeit you've replaced a senior player who was out injured or sick or whatever, and you want the world to revolve around yourself, which it didn't then and it doesn't now. But like I said, there were lessons learned. As time goes on, you sort of become a senior player. You go into coaching, and you have to have these conversations with players who come after you. Sort of thing. So it serves a purpose. But there were times when it was difficult. Yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah, and obviously we're going to lead on to your coaching career sort of a bit later on. But in terms of obviously from the Test side of things, how did you find that initial bit in terms of the difference between first class and then into that Test scene as well? Really. What are the big things, differences wise?
I mean, the usual stuff. The skill levels were a little bit higher than you'd get in first class cricket.
Yeah.
They could squeeze you for longer periods, that kind of thing. The usual cricket stuff. I didn't struggle with believing that I belonged there.
Yeah.
I never doubted that. And to be fair to some of the older lads who were in the Test team at the time, they made it one of their practices was to keep reminding all of us young players at the time that you were good enough. Sometimes they'd be bowling, you'd bat Walsh, Patterson, Ambrose and them in the nets, and every now and again they would come at you, and you sort of battle your way through, and they didn't mind sharing with you afterwards, just giving you feedback. And to the effect that, listen, you batted well, you're good enough. Good luck if you get an opportunity. So it was a bit internal, but also the external environment also provided that little bit extra as well.
In terms of, you mentioned there about in the nets and stuff, do you think that was their way of sort of testing you as well, really? And do you think that they fed that back to management in the way of when they went at you to see how you were reacting in those situations? Because I suppose at the end of the day, on a day-to-day basis in the nets, you're facing, the best attack of regardless of who you face.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they didn't have to send back the management.
No.
The manager and team coach were always there, so they'd be watching. And it wasn't every day that they sort of what's the best way to put it? A lot of these bowlers, these top bowlers, it was about maintenance. These guys played all formats, so it wasn't every day that they would pull the choke on a bowling session. A lot of times they just grooved, and if after 12 balls Curtly felt he was okay, that was him done for the day. But every now and again, maybe early in a tour, one or two of them might think that they really wanted to have a good run out. And if you were the batsman in the net at the time, then it would turn out to be quite an interesting session.
Yeah. You mentioned before about, obviously, the left down spin side of things and bowling, and you mentioned earlier about wicket keeping and stuff. How much did you sort of work on your bowling in terms of versus your batting as well once you got into that test arena?
Listen, long before I got to that level, practice was always just doing something until practice finished.
Yeah.
So, you could go back to school cricket. If I'd finished batting and there's an opportunity to bowl, I'd bowl. If there's an opportunity to keep, I'd keep.
Yeah.
And I did that all the way through, even up to test level. So I never really got coached as a bowler, but I would just bowl. And, I'm hyper competitive. And so you're competing against some of the best batsmen in the world, in the nets, albeit. Yeah. But so I think slowly over time, just you become a little smarter about what you do. I was never a great bowler, but you just you put your wicket keeping gloves on and you keep wicket in the nets if they needed a keeper, and just wanting to be better at something.
Yeah. And
you look at others who are around you who might be better, who you can pick stuff up from. So you sort of, you never become world class at them, but every now and again, it first of all looks good on your CV, and then every now and again, it paid off in tangible ways. I actually played 34, 35 ODIs out of a total of 127 ODIs as a wicketkeeper.
Right, okay.
You have a 5 in international ODI cricket. You never get another one, but like I said, it looks good on the CV. It's like...
I also think it always gives you that option of that versatility, and especially like it gives another string to your bow. That's why I'd always perceive something like that.
Yeah, it didn't hurt me. It didn't hurt, and every now and again it might change a game, or it might inflate your value if you're going to play county cricket or league cricket. You know what I mean? So it pays off in tangible ways. But the selfish thing is that I genuinely would much rather, if I'm the first batter in a net session that's going to last for 2.5 hours, right? And I bat for half an hour, I'll easily bowl for another 1.5, 2 hours if there's nothing else to do.
No.
And if you keep doing that year in, year out for 10, 15 years, then you won't have a massive spike in improvement, but you gradually become more and more competent.
Yeah, definitely. From your test career, then, in terms of the opportunity to captain the West Indies, did you always see that something that would naturally lead that way, and how did you sort of take to that opportunity, really?
No, it wasn't something that I'd ever thought about, and in the scheme of things, if you go back years before it actually happened, you sort of knew what the running order in terms of leadership seniority would be. Once Richie finished, it was, Courtney was filling for a couple of seasons, but Brian Lara was going to be the natural successor. And then if Brian wasn't around, Carl Hooper would be the next in line. So when it did happen, honestly, it was unexpected.
Right, okay.
By the same token, it was a good challenge. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But it's not something that, there are some people who look forward to it and think in those terms. While I will always be thinking as a captain when I'm on the field, whether I'm captain or not. But captaincy was never something that, take it or leave it. I'm not playing because I want to be captain. I'm playing because I want to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
My motivating factor was a skill v skill. I wanted to test the skill against whoever.
Yeah.
Not necessarily lead, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And what were the biggest challenges that came with the captaincy side of things?
The biggest challenge for me was there's enough time that's passed under the bridge now. There was an ongoing tension between the players that I was being asked to lead and the management team of which I was a part of.
Right.
And I was never able to resolve that tension. I won't get into the reasons for the tension, but it made a job that came with inherent pressures even more pressure filled.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest challenge for me was trying to keep a group of young players focused when there was some bullshit going on.
Yeah.
Managerially within the support group.
Yeah.
In all the tours that we're involved in. But again, I don't look back with any regret because, as somebody who has spent quite a few years inside management roles, you come to realize that any group of people supposedly going towards a goal or a target, you're going to have issues like that, people issues, so to speak. So
yeah.
I guess it was an early introduction to that I've referred back to many times since then. But as a young, I might have been a senior player, but I was a young man per se, and I was certainly young to man management. I'd captained a few teams in the past, but not like that.
No.
And it was interesting. It was interesting.
Do you think some of those sort of moments, and you mentioned there obviously about obviously the bits that going outside of obviously of the game as such, did that sort of give you a few good lessons in terms of to help you down the line when the coaching opportunities would come, because you've had to deal with some of the, I say, politics per se, prior to obviously getting into your coaching career? How did it give you that real sort of good understanding of how things sort of go that are outside of your hands at times? Hugely.
Yeah. You can't stress how many lessons were learned throughout your playing career. Bearing in mind that you start out as a junior player,
yeah,
but then you will coach junior players. You become a player who is in your mid career, and you have challenges there, good and bad.
Yeah,
but you will one day manage, coach players who are at that stage in their career, and likewise, you take up a leadership role, and you're having to start to look outside of yourself now. It's not just about you.
Yeah,
you're being asked to look at the game and performances through the eyes of all the other lads in the team and their welfare and all that goes with it. So yeah, it did help in some areas. It was sort of like your first introduction to man management 101, if you want to call it that. Yeah. And yeah, not just for coaching roles, but any roles really. Because most of the roles that I've had since playing, you're dealing with people, and at times you're managing people. So those lessons have become life lessons for me, really, and not just within cricket. Life in general. Yes.
So Jimmy, just from my side, I think obviously thanks for coming on as well. But I find it interesting. Obviously, I would say you're probably maybe 2 generations of a West Indian player before me, and I like history. Obviously, maybe let's say 2.5. I don't want to make you. I've got some gray hairs somewhere in here, so I'll say 2.5. But no, I love the history of West Indies cricket. Obviously, what West Indies cricket has done for me and for many others, I think it's an amazing thing. I think that the story of West Indies cricket should be taught in schools, and the importance of West Indies cricket and what it means to us as a region and as people. But more specifically on this point, I'd like you to, I guess, share some of the, I guess, contributions society would have had on you, like growing up in the Caribbean at that time. So obviously we talk about playing cricket in that time, but growing up in the Caribbean at that time, seeing the things you could have seen, especially being in Jamaica, which is, I always say, for me, and I think I could broadly speak for most regional cricketers, it's probably everybody's second favorite place apart from their home country, you know. So what was it like for you growing up in a Jamaican society then?
Well, listen, it's the only growing up that I know, so there's an obvious bias, okay? And then also in answering the question, it's in hindsight. So I am using the benefit of many years since that have passed since that growing up phase. It was exciting. I am part of a culture. I don't think Jamaicans would take me to task for this. I am part of a culture that sees itself and sees its people as being able to do almost anything. So I grew up seeing a bobsled team go to the Winter Olympics. I grew up seeing reggae artists winning Grammy Awards. I grew up seeing, loads of achievements from Jamaicans in other sports, not just, I would watch Jamaican footballers playing Premier League football. So there's very much a sort of national mindset that many of us believe that if we worked hard enough, we could be as good as anything we saw on television from anywhere in the world, sort of thing. So I think that would probably be one of the overriding feelings during my teenage years. And then I grew up also, if we look, just take a second to look at cricket. In my growing up period, so the 70s and 80s, I only knew a winning West Indies team. So when I went to Sabina Park, to see the West Indies win. If I went with my father, he used to be, it was almost as if he was enjoying it more than me. And it's only when I got older and you experience losing and you realize that my father would have lived through West Indies teams that lost, which is why that period meant so much to him, because he had something to match it against. I struggled a little bit when we started losing because I didn't have that reference point as a child. So, I kind of had to be, it was an interesting phase, that period. But just to say that, I would say that is probably a very broad brushstroke of growing up in Jamaica during my teenage years. Yeah. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
It does, but I want to allude to something a previous guest of ours had, and I don't know if you're still very much of a church-going man, but
very much so.
Right. So we had Marshall St. Patrick on a number of episodes.
His father was my reverend for many years. Yes,
so
man.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. He spoke about going to church and having someone like you and your family as members of the church. So I wanted to, find out, the impact of the church on not only your career but your life, because obviously the church is a massive influence within Caribbean society. Hugely. So I grew up in a Christian home, with sort of, I guess, for a lot of Jamaicans, with all that went with it. So you grew up in the church, you go to Sunday school, all of that kind of thing. I was a member of when I was in school, I was a member of our inter-school Christian fellowship, which is a inter-school group of Christians in school. You can't downplay the role of the church in our society. And when I say church, very broadly speaking, because there are many different church factions within Jamaican and indeed Caribbean society. Personally, my faith has
definitely 100% shaped my thinking ever since I was a teenager. And I dare say it will continue to do so, I think, until I die. I hope so anyway. So that was a huge part of my growing up experience, and continues to be. I'm still up. I still go to church on Sundays, but more than physically going to church, the faith informs everything that I do, every aspect of my life, whether it's professionally working or socially or anything, really. So massive part, and yeah, Michelle's old man was a big part of that journey for me, because for many years in my teens, and I don't say this about many preachers when I was that age. I actually used to enjoy listening to him. He had something about young people. I found he could relate to young people, and I learned a lot, not just from his sermons. Don't tell him I said that, but just in how there were a few of us young people in this particular church, and he just had a way to connect with younger people that some of his other older peers in the church definitely did not have. So yeah. I don't know if that answers that part of the question.
No, it does. It does. Another thing that I find interesting, because obviously you would know, my father, he was obviously a West Indies board member, former Leeward Islands board president, Leeward Islands team manager, etc. And I listened to, I guess, stories of him talking about cricket back then, and that's obviously how I fell in love with cricket. I was by the age of 12, I've seen every West Indies tour that there could be on a DVD at least 5 times. I've been watching cricket my entire life. And I would like to know, obviously, not only from a player's perspective, but you've been in the management side of it, from coaching to director of cricket. What do you think that in the Caribbean has been lost? Is it just as simple as the pitches or the preparation, or is it a love for the game? Well, why we're not able to, I guess, produce players that we once had back then? Because we're playing more cricket now than we used to play back then. It was a 5-game season back then, but you had players going off
at some levels. At some levels.
But you have players going off to the UK back then as well.
Yeah, but in some communities, and I'm going to grassroots level first, in some grassroots communities, there is not the same amount of cricket now as there was back then. But I do agree with you that the professional player now has potentially, not that they do, but potentially they have more cricket at their fingertips now than in my time. In the Caribbean. As in, we used to supplement a lot of our cricket development with coming to England and playing either county or club cricket back in the days. Not just me, but the generations before me. Anyway, go back to the question. What's the question again?
Well, basically, what have we lost, or what do we need to, I guess, take away from our past learnings to be able to, I guess, compete internationally again?
Yeah, so I'm going to, if you can bear with me, I'm going to take a little time to answer that, or to try and answer that. First by saying that if you had asked me that question, I would say, this is 2024. If you had asked me that question from let's say from COVID, backwards, I would have taken up a lot of your time and spoken about improved coaching standards. We need better coaches to get better players. I would have spoken about improving our facilities, which includes pitches, but in totality, pitches, stadiums, all the rest of it. I would have spoken about the territories, implementing quality pathway programs, all of that good stuff that is necessary. But I don't spend a lot of time going down that path anymore, because I am now a convert to the structure of our administrative body in the Caribbean is not fit for purpose. And so if somebody says to me, no, Jimmy, what are the issues with cricket in the Caribbean? My starting point now is we have, and I use the word governance, but you might not use that word. You could talk about the leadership structure. You could talk about the administrative structure. And I'll try and break it down. What we have is our leadership structure. The organization is 6 territories with elected officials from 6 territories, 2 elected officials from each territory, moving up and comprising the West Indies Cricket Board. Okay? The board of directors. Now, constitutionally, those board of directors constitutionally can make or do make all the decisions, the board. No, they will say that isn't so. They will say that we have a paid executive, we have a paid CEO, we have a paid director of cricket, we have a paid chief financial officer, which is true. However, experientially, I have been to 6.5 years of board meetings, and the decisions are made by the board of directors. If you want to be more specific, those decisions are at the very least vetted by the board of directors. And my experience is that if those decisions are crossed, and it's not just a cricket thing, finance, HR, cricket, commercial, all the different elements of the business, if those decisions don't tick the political aspirations of the directorate, they will not happen. No. Time away from the organization has kind of dulled how I view that. Initially, you go through the whole angry phase and you get personal. Gone past that now. If you remove all the directors and allow the process, a voting process, a political process, that takes anybody from the territories who has been very good politically to get to president, vice president of a local association. Anybody who goes through that process and then gets to the West Indies Cricket Board, where there is now another level of the same political behavior, which they have to do. If you get there on a political platform and it is a political organization, you have played the politics well. Give them credit. All I am saying now is that world's best practice, organizations that are intent on producing, competing at a world's best level, that approach is not conducive to doing that. And until that changes, we can talk all we want about all the other good stuff that I'd mentioned before, which is applicable, but it won't come into the equation whatsoever. So let me give you an example. Cricket New Zealand had something similar to us 20 years ago. And somehow, I don't know yet how they got the support internally, but similar representation to a national body and everybody, whether you want to agree with it or not, the fact is that if you're in a political system, your first priority is to take something back home to your constituents. And that is not sports politics. That is any organization that is run on a political framework or within a political framework. Every level is about keeping my constituents happy. Now, New Zealand managed to move away from that model in the mid to late 90s, where they retained control within their provincial setups by saying that the provinces can elect an independent directorate. So you Leeward Islands, you Jamaica, you whoever, you can come together put together a nomination framework and nominate and then select X amount of independent directors. And so, yeah, but how do we control what happens? Simple. If you don't like the directorship, you, the territories, can remove that directorship. But you cannot sit on the board. You, the director from Jamaica, you, the director from Barbados, you, the director from the Labour, you cannot sit on the board. But you can remove the board if you feel collectively that the board is not achieving what you have put it there to achieve. Remove the board. Yeah. Remove the board, and you can remove the chief executive and your executive body. But you cannot fundamentally be making decisions because of a conflict of interest. No, I don't think that it is by chance, Kieran, that New Zealand's cricket has steadily gone on an upward trajectory since 1998, when they completed that exercise. I might be wrong, and I know it's a bit it's a bit unscientific to say what I'm saying. But come back to the original question. And if you understand governance or structures, then fine. If not, it might be difficult for people to see what I'm saying. But what we have in the Caribbean, before anything changes, if that doesn't change, eventually where you're going to get to is where you need an absolute critical performance decision in any of the areas, cricket, finance, commercials, HR, when you need a critical decision to be made to move the organization forward, you run the risk that that decision will be a poor decision because it is made on a political basis, right? Which, to be truthful, and this is why I'm not knocking the individuals anymore. To be successful at what they're doing, you have to play that game. You have to. And so I am not knocking them. I am just saying that for our cricket to start to be able for our cricket to have the potential to compete, the change has to start there. Then you know that, okay, fine, if you have $10 worth of resources and you have independent quality decisions being made on how we allocate those resources, I think over time, over 5 years, 10 years, you will see a region that still has the raw material in the ground. We still have the diamonds in the ground. We still have the young players at 15, 16, 17 who, in a good program with good coaches and good pitches, will become world class. That is still there. But if we don't get that governance / administrative / leadership context sorted, I don't think that changing the other issues are going to have any long-term benefit. Sorry to take so long and so on, but I just wanted you to understand my journey, because up to 5 years ago, Kieran, I was very hot on the pitches and the coaches and the pathway systems and you know, getting 8 tours for our players. All of that is good. Don't get me wrong. All of that is good. But it gets derailed very quickly when, I'll speak from my situation, when key critical positions are handed out on a political basis, when your good decisions are overturned on a political basis, which, while I was angry at the time, no, I'm not angry, because I can understand that it is a political organization, and therefore it doesn't matter who sits in these seats. Anybody who gets elected into those roles is probably going to make a similar decision. So that structure has to change, I think. Sorry to be so long.
No. I think it's a very interesting answer, because I know that they had this big symposium with business individuals, business owners, governments, all these, I guess, different stakeholders from around the Caribbean a few months ago. And we sort of said the same thing, where it's too many, I guess, moving parts in West Indies cricket. We always talk about structure and stuff. And again, I find that funny, because I'm doing a master's degree at the moment, Jimmy. I'm doing a master's at the University of Warwick.
So am I.
Are you?
Yeah, not at the University of Warwick, but yeah, I've gone back to school and it's hard work.
So my current assignment is operations management. And so when you're talking about this, it sort of plays into
operations management. So you're doing input transformation, output. Well done, man.
Yes,
I'm impressed.
Correct. So it goes into my mind of thinking about what I guess the teachings that have happened in this module, and when you look at West Indies cricket, the things that happen. But no, I think you've made some very, very good points there that I've believed wholeheartedly for a long time. But
you see, I think a lot of people, and I was one of them. I could only respond based on what I knew and the level that I was at. So, I'm coming from a coaching background, and so you're gung ho, you're full of energy, and it's like better pitches, better coaches, science and medicine, that kind of thing, and that is good. But the framework, after 4 years, I realized that the framework within which these things were functioning was horribly, or is horribly faulty. And if that framework, yes.
The thing about that framework is the people within the frames are not going to take themselves out of the position because they become no longer needed.
Well, it's not so much taking them. Like if you said, if all the directors, you wave a magic wand, if all the directors step down tomorrow, but the system remain the same of replacing them by elected officials coming out of the territories, I would posit that their replacements are going to act in the same way. The institution behaves in a certain way because of its structure. Don't change the structure, but change all the players within the structure, and you're going to get the same behavior ongoing. So I have sort of gone past some of the stuff that does need to change without a doubt, but the starting point for me has to be at the actual structure itself, the governance structure. We need independent leadership to run the organization that is responsible and reports into your power brokers. But it can't be the power brokers who are political animals making the high performance decisions in cricket, finance, HR. No, I've seen it close up, and I don't think it can work, and I don't think it will work. And I think it puts a cap on what we can justifiably look to sustain by way of improvement. In other words, I can say, the ducks align for a little bit and you win a series here or you win a World Cup there, shorter format. Simply because red ball cricket needs a ton more investment over a longer time to get sustainable results. You're not going to get that sort of sustainability with the structure the leadership structure that we have now. It won't work. It just won't work. And you're pitting ourselves with less resources against other institutions that have more robust structures that are more aligned to high performance, consistent high performance.
I could spend all day talking about this, but let's move to some more.
We're putting Jordan to sleep here, man.
No, genuinely, I love listening to it because I've spoken to Kieran about this, for the past 12, 18 months. So I love getting people's take on stuff, and ultimately a lot of what everyone seems to say are aligned with what people think as well. So I want to just dive back in a little bit from the coaching side of things.
Yes.
So when did the sort of coaching opportunity sort of come post, finishing playing?
Well, I've always coached.
Right.
A lot of it was done. You could call it privately. I did a lot in the Middle East. I used to go and spend a lot of time in Dubai, with a friend of mine who has an academy there, and we used to do a lot of work in Dubai. We used to go on tours to India, to England. I used to do a lot of clinics. I used to take like week-long clinics to clubs around the UK. Nice. So I always coached. It was very difficult to break into, and I would coach in Jamaica as well. When I was at home, I used to spend time with the national team.
All right.
In a sort of assistance capacity, but I couldn't break into county cricket for years and years. You'd send a CV out, and everybody would say, yeah, apply, but then you'd read that. I understand it usually was in-house, some ex-player and stuff like that, which is understandable, somebody who knows the players, I guess, and knows the system. So, you're going through all of that for years, and you're looking for an opportunity where you can. And then I got the opportunity at Kent in 2012, and ended up spending 5 years there, and great experience. And I'd like to think that I added value to what they were doing and what they were about at the time. But it came at the right time, and it was good fun.
And how did you find there's two sort of questions here. How did you find the infrastructure from a county setup side of things?
Well, listen, Kent is not one of the richest counties in England, but I mean, compared to what we have here in Jamaica, When lads were whinging and moaning about what they didn't have, inside here I was laughing. I was thinking, what? Man, you don't know what you have. You know what I mean? Like, you telling me what you can't do because you don't have. And I'm thinking, man, I know players who have gotten to the top with a fraction of what you... So, I never had an issue in terms of, I'd have discussions with the cricket manager or the CEO, and they're like, we can't afford a pro this year, because we were on the brink of bankruptcy when I got there. And there was this can't afford a pro, and that's not upsetting my equilibrium. Jamaica has never used a pro in the 20 years I played for Jamaica. If we had a shit year, then we were responsible to get the shit together and come up better next year. So we didn't. I mean, in terms of a mindset, it actually didn't affect me.
No,
per se. And if players tried to go down that road by way of an excuse, it was like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Put all the players in the room and say, okay, yeah, complain about the overseas pro. You have a problem with it. You stand up and look at the rest of the other players and say, who you want the pro to replace. So here are all your fellow players. You point out which player in this room you want to sit for your overseas player.
Yeah.
Nobody would say anything. Like, fellas, listen, stop hiding and ducking and diving. Get your skill levels up so that when we can afford a pro, the pro comes and joins a team that is playing good cricket.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah.
So it was, I didn't have an issue. I felt that the county that I was attached to had more than enough facilities, opportunities, all of that to develop any player. Well, no, sorry.
Sorry, I got you. Carry on. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that I didn't think that I was struggling for want of resources.
Yeah.
And it was not the richest county.
No. What I was going to say is that during the time, did you see the change in the calendar? In terms of the games. I know it's obviously spoken quite a lot now about the volume of cricket being played across the three formats. Did you start to see that change during that tenure?
Yes, a little bit.
Right.
A little bit. There was a year when Darren Stevens was in Bangladesh. I missed maybe the first game of the season, could have been. But it didn't take a genius to understand that what was already happening in other territories around the world.
Yeah.
was going to hit England eventually.
Yeah.
Because the more the holding of the English summer as sacrosanct was already done away with. So it was only a matter of time before every Tom, Dick and Harry league in the world decides that, well, we have it in August, or we have it in July, or we have it in April. And once that started to happen, then all the market forces will then take over.
Yeah.
If it is a league in Timbuktu in May, and the sums that are involved are let us say comparable to half a county salary, it's not rocket science. You're going to be down 2 or 3 county players until that is finished.
Yeah.
So you knew where it was headed.
Yeah.
And it has thus panned out that way. And,
of course, yeah.
You know, it's an interesting one because if some sort of regulation doesn't provide a better structure going forward, you're going to have a few years of a bit of a free-for-all over the place, which is not bad for players, don't get me wrong. But I don't think anything, including an international sport, is best delivered globally without some sort of structure on competition.
Yeah.
So it could be football or hockey, no matter what the sport is. Yeah.
From a coaching perspective, with the high volume of games that are played in the English season, do you find it quite difficult sometimes to actually have that time to actually coach and
you don't coach in the summer,
right? You just don't.
No, you're coaching in the winter,
right? Is that down?
So,
would you want to do that though, or is that because of the volume?
It don't make sense. You want to do it, you can't do it. You can't coach. There's too much cricket. You don't coach in the summer. My coaching period was the guys would come up from the reporting in 1st of November.
Right.
And you coach from the 1st of November till the end of the middle of March. That's your coaching period. In from April to September, your whole existence and all your resources and all your facilities is built around how can I get my best team on the park day after day after day. So it's all about everything, or 90% of what you're doing is about recovery and making sure that there is going to be if you're talking physicality, there's going to be a gradual dip. What you want is a gradual dip. What you don't want is people to fall off of the cliff by taking it to the end of July, physically and mentally. So you don't coach in those months. You can plant. Don't get me wrong. I'm over. I know what you mean. You're going to keep planting seed. Yeah. Speak, and all the rest of it. But it's the sort of coaching that you do, individualized, one-to-one stuff. Hours and hours, repetition, buckets, whatever you want to call it, that's in the winter.
But how would you deal with somebody then who's potentially going through a loss of form, either with bat or ball in that period of time?
Well, then you drop him and then you make time.
Right. Okay.
But once you pick him, you ain't coaching, you're not, you try and get in his head and make him believe like Jesus, he can walk on water, but you're not really radically affecting how he goes about stuff. He might want to try this and try that and try the other, but the sort of stuff that you would approach in the winter when there is time, you wouldn't do the same thing in the summer. You fiddle around a few things maybe, but nothing drastic, nothing major. A lot of your resources, as I said, are tied into how can I get my performers in a good frame of mind, which tends to be more communication than anything else. Then, just as importantly, physically, how can we make sure that physically they can, every county used to have a period in the calendar, in the playing calendar between April and September, where you would play 13 days of cricket inside 15 days. Everybody had that spot somewhere in the calendar.
Yeah.
And you sort of used to plan your season. You'd look on where that was.
Yeah.
And you'd work backwards.
Right.
Because, how can we get lads starting that period as fresh as they can? And then once we get started, and then if you, like Kent, it was a bigger challenge in the sense that if you don't have a certain size squad, if a lot of your top players are playing across all the formats, then it became even more of a challenge. But it was I found it an interesting challenge. And, at the end of the day, there comes a time when, as most coaches would tell you, you've done all you can do and you just sit down and it is what it is after that. There's not much more you can do from there.
No. I wanted to say, mentioned about the volume of cricket that's played in England. Do you think it will have a detrimental effect somewhere down the line, that it is non-stop and also like across the 40 over tournament that's now, and then the T20, the 100, and then obviously the county championship? Will it have a negative effect at some point?
It already has. Just depends on where you look for it. You're raising a generation of players who don't understand the rhythm of 50 over cricket. And the time will come. I don't wish it, but it's just that's how
inevitable
people learn. Yeah, you'll ask them at the highest level to play situations that they won't be able to. Not because they're not good players.
Yeah.
But they don't understand the rhythm of a 50 over game. 100 overs in the day. There's a rhythm to that game.
Yeah.
There's a way that situations play out. And if all you know is 100, which is a shortened version of T20, it's not the same. So, there was a time when English cricket devoted itself to winning a 50 question again.
We'll talk about the rhythm of a 50 over game and how they not.
Yeah. So if you look at England going back a decade, 10 years ago, sort of like decided that they were going to put resources behind 50 over cricket with an attempt to win a 50 over World Cup, which they did.
Yeah.
But even if they didn't, their 50 over cricket dramatically improved under Owen Morgan and that group and all the rest of it. Now it seems as if they've moved on, which is fine. It's strategically, that's your decision to make. But how it is playing out, obviously, is that if you take 3 or 4 years as a cycle, as a sporting generation, every 4 years you get a new crop from under-19s knocking on the door of international cricket across all sports. So by the time the 100 is what, 2 years now? 3 years? 2 years? 3 years?
Second year he's done.
Second year. So another 2 more years at the 100 and nobody paying attention to 50 over cricket. And you will be setting yourself up now where, as an outsider, I would ask, well, what is it that you're going to expect when you go to a 50 over World Cup? Be very careful. Okay? Because you will have a generation of players that don't understand 50 over cricket.
No, they don't play
it. By the same token, I could say, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but just to make the point, you want to play Test cricket a certain way, which is fine, but I am running into a generation of young batsmen who want to play for England, and therefore they are trying to bat a certain way, which is fine. What interests me is how will England cope when the two batsmen who have proven at international level that they can bat situations, which is the captain and Root, when they leave. If you don't have a group of players coming out of county cricket that understand the rhythm of time cricket, there's a rhythm to time cricket, and if you only play or bat in fifth gear, then you're going to find out when you run into teams that can slow things down or whatever. So it's you have to be very careful. But come back to what you're saying. I think the market will dictate what happens. You something had to give, so the 50 over cricket has given way. Okay. Yeah. White ball cricket, the 100 blast gets the best part of the summer.
Yeah.
So to speak. Certainly in terms of, usually in terms of weather and so on.
The peak of,
I think the English summer can cope with 3 competition. It has proven that. It's tight, but it can cope. It can't cope with 4.
No.
So right now it has thrown the 50 over under the bus, which is fine. Like I said, if strategically, if it meets their strategic plans, then yeah. But don't then turn around and get upset if you don't make it past the first round of our 50 over World Cup.
Yeah.
In 2 years' time.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
No, because they're not playing it. They're playing the Royal London with 40 over cricket, which is effectively borderline a borderline second 11 with the way that's. I think it's obviously from my perspective as an England fan, it's frustrating to think that we're not working towards the Champions Trophy, and then also beyond it, it doesn't seem that we're going to be playing much 50. Well, we're not going to be playing any 50 over cricket towards that. So I don't.
Well, the question, it's interesting because I would say, again, as an outsider, what did the 50 over World Cup mean to England when they won it 3 years ago?
It was huge. It was massive for England. That, but like from a, you think about that from an engagement perspective for fans.
Correct.
It was a massive thing. People were fully engaged in that final, and once you get to the business end of the tournament, it was a big thing. I have friends who, are cricket fans as such, but they're not watching day to day stuff. It was a massive conversation. It was like, oh, are we watching it? What's happening? This and that. So you get that engagement from a fan perspective, and I think that's sort of been neglected a little. But it has been neglected since, which is a shame.
Yeah. Well, and again, until we start a party to people's strategic plans, I don't know what drove the economics of the 100. But if somebody explained it to me, maybe I might turn around and say, listen, yeah, you were right in ditching the 50 over for this because your long-term financial future in the game is all of that spiel. You know what I mean? There could be something to it. So I'm not knocking the outcome. I'm just saying that every outcome carries a consequence.
Yeah.
Plus or minus. And if you don't play a version of a sport, and generation after generation isn't playing that version of the sport, then you don't go at the international level against the best proponents of that version and say, we're going to put together guys who can hit a long ball and bowl Yorkers and that will win it. No, it won't. There's a different rhythm to 50 over than T20 and 100.
No, definitely. I think, I could, similar to when you and Kieran having the conversation before, I could talk, we could do an episode on its own in terms of that side of things. But I wanted to ask as well, how did you find it over here working with the West Indies again from that national side of things, from a batting coach?
I enjoy coaching. Coaching. So when I stepped away from the director's role last year, the only plans I had was this course that I'm doing. And then what happened was that the head coach at the time was struggling to fill his support roles full time. So he asked if in the interim, if I could sort of fill that gap in the interim. Right. So I said, it shouldn't impact my ability to do what he's doing in other areas.
Yeah.
So we started with an A tour last year in South Africa. Then we went to Australia.
Yeah.
And then we did a couple of tours. So it fits in pretty neatly with the studying that I'm doing. So it's worked out pretty well. Because I do enjoy it. It's a good bunch of young lads. They're raw, but they're very keen and they're teachable, which is all that coaches ask, really.
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, it's been fun.
Oh, fantastic. That's good. And in terms of, obviously, anything in the future, have you got any future plans to, from a coaching side of things as well?
Everything has kind of been put on hold until I get through this course. I'm not an academic, so I have to plod my way through and I need time. So ask me the same question maybe later on next year when the course is winding down. And I'm not doing anything full-time until that is finished.
Yeah.
So whatever I do is going to be part-time with the course being the priority. And then after that, I'll have a look around and see what options are out there.
No, fantastic. Oh, well, I just want to say, obviously, thank you so much for joining me and Kieran tonight. It's been brilliant, and thank you so much. Been really insightful from the journey of starting, obviously, to where you're at now. Thank you. I really do appreciate your time to discuss it with us.
No problem, Jordan. Paul, look after yourself, boss, and good luck on the course, yeah?
Same to you. All
right, boss. All the best.
Thank you for joining us on the PowettPlay podcast, hosted by Kieran Powell and Jordan Shannon. We hope you enjoyed this immersive dive into the world of cricket and business, exploring the unique experiences and perspectives of players past and present, alongside those invaluable insights into intriguing business themes that transcend beyond the boundaries of sporting heroics. Be sure to set your reminders on your Alexa or Google Home device. Or we won't tell anyone if you still use those paper calendar things from a bygone era. Join us next time for more inspiring dialogue with scintillating minds on the PowettPlay podcast.